We are so pleased to have you here this evening. I'm Bob Workman, director at the Ulrich Museum, and we are particularly pleased to be able to launch our 2016-17 Salon Circle lecture series here at Marcus Wellcome Center. I was telling more than one of you that if I could only duplicate this front part of this building and put it on the Ulrich, we'd be in pretty good shape. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that, Dr. King. It's always a great time to be a shocker, but perhaps this fall more than usual. I think most of you are aware that we are in the final stages of the reinstallation of the Juan Moreau mural on the facade of the Ulrich. I believe, yay. And of course, I hope you all have Sunday, October 30th on your calendar for the community celebration welcoming the mural back. It looks absolutely spectacular. So we will be all things Moreau very, very shortly. Yesterday, there was a very important announcement. The Wichita State University Foundation and President Bardot announced the $250 million Shock the World campaign. It was a fabulous kickoff, beautifully done, and you are at 145 million of the 250 goal now. So congratulations to the WSU Foundation, and we have three of its most important people in the room with us, Keith and Elizabeth and Duran, so we're very fortunate tonight. There are 4 building projects as a part of that campaign, which has a major emphasis on scholarships, on people, the scholarships for students, enhancement for faculty positions, and then facilities enhancement as well. And there's one in particular that's very exciting for us, and that is the renovation to Henry and Hall and the Ideas Lab that'll be going in there. And Rodney's here this evening. I'm sure he'd be happy to tell you about that. And it's, selfishly, there will probably be some dominoes that fall once Henry and Hall gets done, and so the Ulrich is anxiously looking for opportunities as all that unfolds in the years ahead. But it is a great time to be a shocker, and it's a really exciting time to see everyone's engagement here at WSU. I am curious, have most of you been over to this side of campus in the last 6 months? Okay, so the dirt wasn't a big surprise? Okay, good. Well, there's a lot going on, and I guess the most important thing is everybody's telling me is the new Starbucks, which will be on the other it'll be on the other side of the parking lot here. President Bardot says it's the largest in Kansas, 2,000 square feet with an 11 car line. So double line, 11 car double line. Oh, and a pipe to Elizabeth's office, good. Yeah. I'm really excited about this year's Salon Circle series. Our theme is Art of the Book as Art, and we are, for each of our series, I hope you've noticed, I've tried real hard to find an appropriate Wichita or Wichita State angle to the lecture series. This year, it was so obvious that, in fact, it helped kind of inform the, oh, yeah. You're not laughing at me, okay, good. But it's a very exciting moment celebrating art in Wichita and artists in Wichita, and from a whole variety of angles. And I think the most eloquent expression of that is the new book, Wichita Artists in Their Studios, by Sondra Langel with photography by Larry Schwarm. So this evening, we are going to enjoy a conversation between them about the book with pictures of people that we all know and love. And I'm sure there'll be some great stories. We could also very easily have had Sonia Gredeman on stage as well because Greteman Group designed the book, and it's just it's one of those takes a village to do, but obviously Sondra had the idea and saw it through with great dedication and love. I have a little bit of an introduction here. Sondra Langel resides in Wichita and has been married to Dick Smith since 2005. They each have 2 adult children. Sondra's been an active volunteer for many years with a number of community organizations, including Wichita Junior League, Wichita Symphony, Kansas Children's Service League, and Ronald McDonald's Houses. She serves on the board of the Wichita Art Museum. She is founder and retired executive director of Kansas Health Ethics, Inc. Larry Schwarm received his MFA from the University of Kansas, taught at Emporia State before joining the WSU faculty as Distinguished Professor of Photography in 2013. His work has appeared in many publications, including the monograph Larry Schwarm on Fire, published by Duke University in 2003. Larry has an extensive exhibition record and has photographs in the collection of Smithsonian American Art Museum, Duke University, Library of Congress, LA County Museum of Art, Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, Philadelphia Museum of Art, San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, Wichita Art Museum, and the Ulrich Museum. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Sondra Langel and Larry Schwarm.
Thank you very much.
I will start out by saying if Sondra Langel ever asks you to meet her for lunch, decline the invitation.
He doesn't actually mean that. We all know that. We want to start by saying thank you to Bob and to Carolyn Koppel, who's been helping us, and to the Salon Society for inviting us. It's a privilege to be here with all of these friends. Thank you for coming. We are going to enjoy the evening by just telling some stories. That's our plan. I see in the audience many of the stars of this book, and they are the artists who were featured. So if you wouldn't mind, artists, let me see you stand. Come on, Chris. Thank you very much. There are some other people also who need to be recognized, and that is an advisory group of people who helped in many points along the way, saying encouraging things and helping us when it came time to select featured artists out of a large list of nominated artists. So if you all in the advisory group would not mind standing, I think people would like to see those of you who helped us put this together. Yes. And then there's Jim Johnson. Where are you, Jim? Jim wrote the foreword to the book. And Julia Langel, my daughter, who at first was reluctant, but later got really into editing her mother's work. So she's in the back there. Larry and I were very fortunate to become associated with the best professionals we could possibly have had to work with. Sonia and her group at the Greteman Group, they were, you want to stand? They took a beginner, and you can't be much more of a beginner than I was when we started this, and helped us put together something we could be really proud of. So we appreciate everything you did to help us make that possible. Mark Bosman is not here, but he did just a huge chore of the task of putting the book together. I see Trish Higgins is here. She gave me advice. And Sarah Bagby, who is not here, was also very helpful and is, by the way, selling the book. So it'd be a good place to go if you want to buy a book. So
Okay,
are we ready to go?
I don't have it. Okay.
Okay. This the story of the book started in too much? Okay. It started in 2011. My husband Dick and I spend time in Florida, and we happened to come across this book. Well, we didn't quite happen to come across it. A very dear friend of ours, who is an artist, was featured in this book, which was published in Naples, Florida. And she was so excited about this book. She said it was the most wonderful, affirming thing that had happened to her in her life as an artist. She said, people now can find me. I don't have to lug my pictures to the park and set up a tent and do that. She said it was just a nice, wonderful thing that happened, and she was featured in this book. I guess that is her. It happens that Lynne Graham Piper graduated from East High in Wichita in the same year as did my husband, Dick Smith. She went on to be a stewardess on TWA and never came back to Wichita. Lived in Naples then until she recently passed away. But I said to myself, if you could do a book that would make somebody that happy, why wouldn't you just do it? So then I invited Larry to lunch. You want to talk about?
Well, yeah. So actually, I'll just flip ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, here's my email from this person, Sondra Langel, saying she wanted to let me introduce myself. And we met at the country club, and she showed me this book, and she said that she would like to do something similar for well, actually, the first time she said it, I'd like to do something similar for the artist of Kansas. And as I remember the conversation, I go, that's a really big area. How are you going to cover it? So, well, I'm thinking more like in the Wichita area. Define Wichita area. Well, maybe El Dorado. So, okay, so you live in El Dorado. How about Emporia? Well, maybe, but so I said, okay, if we're going to do this, we need to define it really specifically so we know what we're working with. And then she said, well, okay, let's make a list of artists. And that's where I said, Says, too many of these people are my friends, and too many of these people might be my friends in the future, but they won't be if I don't pick them. So we went back and, well, another thing that she did, and I'll back up here for this, but she had a couple other books with her that they were about Kansas artists. And one of them, this one is about Kansas artists, obviously, because this is a Kansas collection. And this one I had seen before. This was published the year that I moved back to Kansas after being gone for a while. And so I was aware of it, but I'd never actually owned a copy. And then the other one was produced here in Wichita, and I'd never seen this one. It's by Jimmy the Cameraman. And a number of the same artists that are in this book or in this book. And this one was produced in 2001, I believe. I'd have to look at the date again. But
203.
yeah,
200.
she said, I want to do something better than this. And would you and so, well, I was a little, I confessed to being a little naive about it because I thought, sure, I'll do this. And I guess I just didn't realize that this is a woman, when she sets her mind to it, she is going to cover every possible aspect of it. It's not going to be done half-assed, excuse me, but it's not going to be done halfway. And it was way more of a job than I ever anticipated, but at the same time, it was way more satisfying and gratifying. One of the reasons that I was interested in taking on it, and Sondra keeps giving me a lot of credit for this, but it is her baby. It's her idea. She put the money behind it. She took care of all the details, and if it had been up to me, we would still be working on this book.
But I never let him sleep late. We set up appointments early in the morning, late in the day. We did a lot of appointments.
So one of the reasons that I was really interested in doing it, I would, right off the bat, I said, I know a lot of artists in Wichita, but I still feel like I'm a newcomer here. We've been here 8 years now. And she was saying 50 artists. And I was thinking, well, that's a really good number. First I thought it was a little optimistic, then I started counting people I knew. Well, I know 50 people, and there's a lot of people I don't know. So I saw this as an opportunity for me to really get to know these people. And other people I knew, I'm going to say maybe, well, the people in the book, maybe a third of them I know pretty well, and a third of them I'd heard of and maybe met at a party, how are you doing? And a third of them I'd never heard of. So this was a great opportunity for me to spend several hours with them on really a one-on-one basis. So I have a lot more friends in Wichita now than I did a year ago.
Me too. It was a great opportunity. And you know, all of the artists that we visited were so gracious, welcoming us into their homes, into private spaces where magic happens. It was a very exciting thing to do. But in order to get there, there were details that had to be taken care of. And after I told my astonished family in May of 2015 that I was going to do this, I started doing research, looking up how do you write and publish a book. And I started collecting books. I bought about 20 other books about artists in their studios. It's a genre. Did you know that? I didn't know that. It's something that's very popular. And none of their books are as good as ours, but it was fun buying the books. And the next thing I did, and I have to make a confession, I like to control things. I decided to be a publisher. So I went and made myself a publisher. I got a publishing company and started learning about Kansas law and banking, all the things that were necessary. But it got done, and it worked out. And the book is published by Bookworks, LLC. The M stands for Max, and M stands for Murphy. Those are two dogs that I happen to enjoy. So that's the name of our publishing company, and that's what we did.
You should see the checks. They're paw prints.
Right. The next thing was ask for nominations, and I relied on Patricia McDonald and Bob Workman and Mike Michaelis and Jeff Kennedy. All of them gave me advice about how to go about doing things. And so I started sending out letters and asking people for nominations for artists. And we got 115 nominations. And then we gathered together the selection advisors, who all came to lunch and sat there for hours.
There's that lunch again.
It's another lunch. Yeah, if I call you for lunch, I'm not kidding. We sat there for about 5 hours one afternoon, and we would have loved to have 115 artists in our book, but it just wasn't going to happen. And we tried to choose a real variety. We wanted all kinds of art to be displayed in our book, and we wanted to have all different kinds of artists, and I think we did pretty well. We had more men than women, and that's okay, but we got plenty of women. And it represents all kinds of art. So after we had the list reduced from 115 to 50, I went home and sent out letters of invitation to the 50 artists saying, please let me know, can you be in our book? And began getting phone calls and emails and letters right away from artists saying that they'd be willing to do that.
And there were a few skeptical ones too, because there is this sort. I'll call it a scam, and I've been invited to be part of a book before, and you are instantly accepted for publication, and then they publish the book, and they say, if you'd like a copy, it's yours for $125, and you get it, and your photo's like postage stamp size, along with 400 other people. So they refuse nobody, but they'll take anybody's check. So some people kind of had to check us out, I think.
Right. A number of people called Mike Michaelis. You probably know Mike, or many of you know Mike. He's you too? You got phone calls too? They're saying, who is this person, and can we trust her? But thank goodness, everybody said yes, except for one person who had good reasons for not choosing to do it with us. So we got 50 artists, and on September the 1st, we made our first visit to Steve Murillo.
Oh, that's the last visit.
That's the last visit. Okay. Did you put up the list of the artists?
Yeah, okay, list of artists. These are in alphabetical order. If you were watching of course you don't know where the starting point was, but the slides that were rotating through when we walked in, those were in the order that we took them. And Jenny Becker was the first one. Steve Murillo was the second one.
Okay.
As I remember, actually we did them at exactly the same time.
Right. That wasn't the one where you went one place and I went the other place.
No, that was another one.
Okay. Well, anyway, starting after that, we set up a schedule that was pretty demanding. We made about 5 visits a week, and usually just 1 visit a day, although sometimes we did 2 visits in a day. Just kind of trying to find a good time for the various artists and as well as ourselves. Larry had this inconvenient problem of teaching school from time to time, so we worked around that. But we got our visits done between September the 15th and December the 16th.
Yeah, I put this one back on just because it has the date the first time I ever met this woman. My invitation to meet this woman was 6/29, and the email here was our last 3 people, which I would like to point out. The 3 people that procrastinated the longest are all in this room. Actually, my photo was the very last one, but 3 months and 2 weeks after she talked to me, we had all 50 artists photographed.
Yeah, we were busy. But Larry is just phenomenal. I'm sure you all know that. He managed to take intimate portraits of every artist. Yes, thank you. He did. They're just wonderful pictures. They could have been headshots, but they weren't. They were portraits. And I know he took lots and lots of pictures. Sometimes we were in people's basements, and he was standing on washing machines and taking pictures that way. Sometimes we were in purpose-built buildings that were dedicated to one artist, and he had a little more space to take pictures in a situation like that. We saw all kinds of places, and it was a real treat to see all the different sites that house the artists that are working in Wichita. We went out to Todd Matson, whose studio is at a church. And we saw a lot of other interesting places, didn't we? I'm not sure what's on the screen. Oh, we're still on the last one.
Okay. Oh, I guess we're talking about. Okay, so I'm going to take over for a little bit here, and just talk about my part of it was photographing the people, obviously, and this is sort of I will say out of my comfort zone a little bit. It's not what I really do. There was a period in my life, almost 30 years ago now, where I did commercial work, and so I did do some photography of people then, in their environment, like for annual reports and that sort of thing. But it was quite different. They had to be very posed and very authoritarian and important people, and that's really not what I wanted to do here. So, and most of you know my work. So it's mostly landscape, and it's not that much people. And when it is people, it's very different than this. Anyway, so point being that I was approaching this as something I've never quite done before, and I decided right off the bat that I really wanted to have a visual conversation with these people as well as a verbal conversation. I wanted the photographs to look like they were talking to you. And one of the first things that we ran into was that when we visited these places, Sondra would start talking to them, and a la here, and I could never get the subjects to quit talking to her. So we had to set up some ground rules. I think it was probably the second visit. It says, you talk, you go away, you leave me alone. And she was a good sport about it, and there was some overlap, and sometimes it worked out fine, but I really felt that the conversation needed to be happening between my camera and the person that I'm photographing. So, and it was really great for me too, because I'm walking into these places. Most of them I had never. Okay, of these places, the only place I was familiar with, two places. That's Chris Bruner's studio at the top there, and Ted Adler's at WSU. We're on WSU, on campus here. That's the ceramics area. But most of the places I'd never been in before, so I had to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? So I would listen to Sondra talking to these people, and I would start getting to know them a little bit so I can kind of assess their personality and see if I could match what their personality and the kind of work that they do with the photograph that I wanted to take. And I put this one in partially because it's just a technical thing, if anybody's curious about it, but the book was artists in their studios. So I felt that it needed to be equally about the person and their space. And the traditional way of photographing somebody as a portrait, and what I would do is for an annual report was I would do like this. I would focus on the person, and I would throw the background slightly out of focus because you don't want to see what books are on their shelves or all that kind of stuff. It seemed like it was really important in this case to see that stuff. Also, something I really wanted to avoid was the posed portrait. Like, okay, I'm the photographer now, do this. It's such an easy trap to fall into, but I wanted it to feel more animated. I wanted it to feel friendlier than that. So right away, what the point of all this is that dictated to me that I had to light these. So every photograph in this book has some artificial light in it. The minimal one would be Tina Morano, thank you. Because she was outdoors, but then there, all I did was just put a flash on the camera because the shadow of her hard hat was too dark. But all the rest of them, I'm taking in my studio lights, so I'm coming in, I'm having to find the outlets, extension cords, set up the lights while Sondra's talking, and when she's finished, which is generally 15 to 30 minutes, then I was ready to start taking my photos. So anyway, I put this one into Steve because both things are happening here. He's moving his hand, which slow shutter speed because there's not very much light in the studio, and the background's out of focus because the lens is wide open, shallow depth of field. Okay, so anyway, by lighting it, I could have more light so I could stop the action. I could shoot the faster shutter speed, and also as you stop the camera down, you have a higher f-stop, more and more things appear to be in focus, so I could get everything in the image in focus. Here I just put these two in because this is the difference between natural light and artificial light. I thought I could probably pull it off by shooting, because we're outdoors, there's quite a bit of light in this garage, and but when I would change my camera so I was exposing for him, then all that background was completely blown out. We ended up not using this shot at all, but I did love his chicken. Chicken would get up on there on his workbench there, and just like, give me a little scratch.
Right, yes.
So I think for the Greteman group, I sent in duplicates of not duplicates, but 2 images of some people because I couldn't decide. And the one with the chicken and the bottom one are the ones I couldn't decide, and they chose the bottom one. But, okay, so this is well, it wasn't typical. None of them were typical, I guess. But so we went to his house, and yeah, I have a studio here. And as we're talking, he says, well, really, I do most of my work on murals, so I kind of consider those to be my studio. So let's do that. And it was 21st and
North.
Waco, in that area, up in there anyway. And there was a building here, and we did it on the side because he was kind of proud of that one. And we walked around behind, and that's the bottom shot. And that was funny. Oh my God, this is it, you know. And then you got to work with the people. Most of you know Randy Regier, and he's being way too serious here. This is the artist. So I said, okay, come on, Randy. We've been friends for years. Lighten up. So. But he's still pretty serious face, and we kept shooting. So one thing I did it with film too, but something I really love about digital is that you can shoot hundreds of shots if you have to, and just keep talking, and pretty soon they forget that you're taking your photo, and you just become friends, and you get shots like this. And just a typical, okay, so I put Patrick and Elizabeth because I think they're still in Canada. I figured it'd be safe talking about them a little bit. Back Tuesday. So
Well, go and tell.
kind of no, these are all, I think, mostly flattering, but it's kind of a typical visit. We go in, and for Patrick, if you've been to his apartment, the first thing you do is, you want a cup of coffee? And of course you do, and so he's making coffee, he's talking, and we're all chatting, and we're getting to be friends, and then Sondra starts talking to him, and he's explaining what he's doing, and I kind of already know what he does. He's a pretty good friend, but I'm walking around. I've never thought about photographing in his area, so I'm walking around just taking shots of different parts of their apartment, trying to decide what's going to look good. Whoops, and not that it's that important, but there. I decided that was more about the portrait he's doing than about him. And then it kind of settled in to, this is the area where he's working. What I was really responding to here was this light coming in through the window, which that's natural light. I didn't make that light, but he was so much in shadow that you couldn't really see him. So there's lights on. I've got my lights on to lighten the shadow areas up. And then I just sort of start walking around, taking photos as we're talking, trying different angles, and I think this is one of probably my favorite, but, oh, then there's Elizabeth. And I put her in for 2 reasons. She is a classic example of, like, you've got to keep talking. Because she is very, very animated, and that's exactly what I wanted. But sometimes very, very animated people can make some kind of, once you stop that animation, it may not be the perfect moment. So we just kept shooting. And she kept making faces, and then she was beautiful. But then I was looking at the photo, and I say, wait a minute, this is your studio, but that's all Patrick's work up there. So that's not going to work. So So we just turned around, and from this side of the studio, I said, climb up there on that loft area, which she did, and I like this angle better. So we're getting closer. So I've already been here an hour, but I'm looking at it, so there's one thing still lacking. You're kind of getting lost up there. Go change your shirt, and she changed it to a light gray, and that's what it was. So you're constantly making these little decisions about what to do, what to do, what to do. How can I make this photograph better? How can the light be better? How can the background be better? And so it's just photographing the purse is a little tiny piece of it. And there's the layout on both of them. I put this in so we could get George Lucas's picture in here today.
The photography was the wonderful part, but after the visits were over, we had to get serious about a lot of sort of tricky things. One of the things we did was we asked the artists to submit images of their art, the art that they wanted to have displayed in the book. And that sounded good, but uploading images that are high res was a stretch. And it wasn't easy for any of the artists, I think. There were a few who, sat down and just did that right away, but that was work, and more work than I had ever anticipated that it would be. But thanks to all of those artists, they did it. They submitted the work that you see in the book that represents their art. And gosh, we were so proud of them for getting all that together. And
Did you get them all the first try?
No.
That was a loaded question.
That is a loaded question. And of course, the Greteman group was doing the layout for the book, and they helped the artists as they helped Larry and me select everything and put it all together. And I learned a whole lot of new words, like Dropbox. I didn't know that. And then we learned about press check. I'd never heard of that. And that's a pretty exciting thing to do, especially if you get to go with Sonia, who is the expert. We had our book printed by Don Levy here in Wichita, and we were proud that it could be done right here. And Gary Douglas at Don Levy helped us along the way a lot. But it is quite an experience to have the printer call and say, we need a press check in about 15 minutes. So I would get in my car and get there as fast as I could, and Sonia was always there before me. And the amazing thing was, we would look at these pages as they came off the press, and I would think, oh, wow, that looks great. And Sonia would say, there's something wrong with this gray. This isn't the gray we want. And so, amazingly to me, Gary would smile and say, oh, good, let's fix it. And, she kept at it until it was just right. So I learned so much doing that and really enjoyed it. The books were printed here. They were sent down to San Antonio to be bound, and that's where we got in trouble because the bindery broke down. So we had planned to have a big launch party on April 30th. And I had printed up about 100 invitations to all my closest friends and sent out emails and everything. We were going to have this launch party no matter what, but we weren't going to have books. But then eventually, thanks, I think, to Sonia, we managed to have 200 for the launch party, and I think we sold them all or gave them away that night. This is a picture of the launch party at the Wichita Art Museum, and gosh, it's a great place to have a party. They're so helpful, and we had, I think, a really great time. Almost all the artists were able to come, and I think they had a good time, and what we did was we signed books. It was like high school yearbook day. And this is all of the artists who were at the party posing on the steps at the Wichita Art Museum. And after that, we all haven't seen each other in that intimate way again. But the book has been selling, and I'm pleased about that. And, you know, when I look at the book, it makes me smile. And I feel good about it. And I feel so fortunate that I had so much expert help, especially Larry and Sonia and Patricia and everybody, Bob, everybody who was helping. And I thank you all for coming tonight. It's a pleasure to get a chance to tell our story. We could answer questions if there are some.
You took the photo of everybody on the step, and that'll be my last letter.
Oh, no, please, more
No, no,
questions. Ask her what her next book's going to be.
That was Carrie Conover. Carrie Conover.
It was Carrie's.
Yes, yes.
When's the next book?
When? Tell them what your idea is.
Which was my idea, I don't remember.
Larry had one idea for the next book. He said, let's do one on tattoos.
I thought salon members fully tattooed. There was some talk about a cookbook. There was talk about, we've thrown out a number of ideas. It's kind of addictive, especially when somebody else is running the show.
We had fun, yes.
In the second email, you talked about meeting with Chris Bruner and Janet Durfee and Bruce Von Osdale. Who's Bruce Von Osdale?
Oh, it's Mr. Trish.
I know that. Hey, I have something to say about it.
Oh.
I loved it because they came in, I could tell they were at the end. They were at the end, let's do it, get out of here. I said, all right. And they did a wonderful job. It was a lot of fun.
Well, it was fun for us too. Any other questions? Yes.
And Bruce's was a bit of a challenge just because it was this cavernous classroom and it was after school, so everything was, cleaned up and all the chairs were on top of the desk and there was so much visual stuff going on in there. So we had to figure out a place where we could do it and we didn't get too much stuff in the background and just light the foreground, and we pulled it off, I think. But
I don't have a question, but I just want to thank both of you because growing up in Wichita, knowing some of the artists, I learned so much from your both, especially here tonight. And thank you for what you've done.
Thank you. That's very nice.
any other questions? Yep, there's more.
Yes, Georgia? Hugh Greer. Yeah, that's his paint table. He likes to point that out to people, by the way. Those are my paints. Yes.
So who were the difficult subjects?
Oh, there weren't any. How's that?
Yeah.
Most memorable? Well, one of my favorite visits.
Oh, okay. Okay, go ahead. You're
Oh,
probably
well,
going
I
to
was-
tell the same story. but-
What? No. Mike Miller. His place is so fun. I think many of you probably went. We could go out to see his studio. It's a treat to be there. And and I didn't know Mike before I went out there. It's a treat to meet him. It's just such an unusual, entertaining, imaginative guy. That's a great place. Love that visit.
Well, there's another story that goes with him. That was the only time this happened, but I show up out there, and Mike says, "You're supposed to come next week." And Sondra shows up at Kurt Klontz, and he says, or she says, "Well, where's Larry?" We've got our weeks mixed up, but it actually worked out great. But
Yeah, it worked fine.
and actually, it worked out better because he was going to clean up his shop before I came out, and he didn't. And he'd been working on a project where he was making, I think, a spider. It doesn't really matter, but he was using Osage orange, which is wood, which is very, very yellow. And he'd been doing a lot of sanding, so his entire studio was just covered in yellow dust. It was really pretty.
So if Larry had followed the schedule, he would never have got to take a picture of all that dust.
That's why I
all-
didn't.
all over the place. There is another kind of funny story, and that is, before we made each visit, I sent the artist a little kind of set of instructions, which said, don't clean up, don't wear fancy clothes, look like an artist, just, be normal, like you always are. And most of the artists, aside from just putting on their best black T-shirt, would kind of follow along with that. But one artist surprised us by tidying away every art thing he had, painting the walls and the floor of his studio. It was the most pristine space I've ever been in.
And putting on a suit before we
Yes, yes, and a suit. So we smile. We made it work. Larry made it work, actually. So that was fun.
Yes.
Yes.
Explain your self-portrait.
Okay. I was actually the very last artist to be photographed because I had been thinking about it the entire time I was photographing. And my first thing I was going to do is I was going to have one of my students take the photo. I have some very talented students who have done a great job. But then as I got toward the end, I thought, I have taken every other photograph in this book. I probably should take this photograph. And the cliche would have been to see the self-timer, and I could have put my little beret on or whatever. And it was just, I really didn't think that much about it, but I was playing around one day and thinking I'd like to do it in our living room because we've got some kind of interesting objects in there. And I got my cell phone out to take a photograph. Sometimes I use my cell phone as a note taker. It's like you can just, like I was doing here, with taking locations. And I saw myself in the mirror. So anyway, the photograph is of my cell phone taking a picture of me in the mirror. So it's not a selfie like this. It's a selfie like the photograph's just taking a picture of the mirror. I'm taking a picture of the phone, and so it's kind of a little circle. And I like it that I'm very indistinct. You can't see a wrinkle on me.
As if. I think it was a terrific picture. I love the way you did that. Any other questions? Yes, George.
A little bit about the difference between the activities of the M&M publishing company and what Sonia does.
The difference? That's me. I'm.
Between publishing and
Oh, I see what you mean.
and so on that group does.
Well, there's not very much in common. Being the publisher just meant figuring out expenses and, I have to file taxes, Kansas sales tax, and figure all that out. But the thing that the reason why I did it was because, as I told you before, I'm a controller and I like to make decisions. I didn't want someone else to decide what the book would be like. So I was able to do that.
Actually, something you haven't talked about. Oh.
What?
Not so much artistically as
Oh, it's just business. Yeah.
And something you haven't talked about that much is your writing. You were the author.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I wouldn't have done it except that I enjoy writing, and this was a real challenge and fun to do and hard to do. One of the hard things was persuading the artists that it was really about their studios. What they wanted was artist statements, and I'm not qualified to do that. I can write about studios, but I can't criticize art or evaluate it or in any way put myself forward as an expert. And so this book was a little different from what some of the artists were expecting, but bless their hearts, they got into it. Eventually, they came around. So we got our studio book. I did a lot of the writing at night, I have to tell you that. you know, we would go out and talk to people in the daytime, and then the writing was, after everything kind of settled down and it was quiet in the house, I would think about what I had seen that day and heard from people and try to do it that way. A lot of hours spent writing and rewriting, and if anybody ever says to you, proofreading, run. I mean, you cannot proofread once, you proofread it, and then and then you look at it again and you say, oh my gosh, how did that happen? Yeah, right. It's important. And if Sonia is doing your book, perfection is the only thing that's acceptable. So we did proofreading, didn't we, Sonia? Over and over. But you know, it's rewarding in the end. But did you actually find an error?
No, there's an error here, and this is.
Have you found one?
Hmm?
There's one?
No, I didn't. But
I told you.
on the page with the artist list, under behind Kathleen Shanahan, there's a 2. But it's not in the book. So this was one of that you sent out as a proof.
Right. We did catch that. I remember that. Yep. there it
Kathleen
is.
Shanahan the second.
We,
Okay, let's go eat.
yeah, let's go out.
Thank you both so much. This was, I know, a labor of love, but a couple of you said to me when you came in this evening, a kind of off-the-cuff remark that this is probably one of the best things that's happened to Wichita Artists for a very long time, and it's really elevated our appreciation and understanding of our arts community. It's a gorgeous book. The photography is extraordinary. One thing you hadn't mentioned is it also has a wonderful little reference section in the back where you can actually reach out to the artists, which is very nice. It allows the individual to, explore on their own, looking at artists' websites and contacting them directly and all of that. So thank you. I'm so glad we were able to do this. It worked beautifully with our theme, and you had your launch at WHAM and a little discussion here, so it's part of our arts world, and we're very happy that we were able to share it with everybody this evening. Storm seems to be okay. Good. We've been trying to keep an eye on it for you, and so we can, books are for sale, so help yourself.